Daniel stared at his phone, jaw clenched, as a cold message blinked on the screen. Order canceled. Account flagged for fraud. His combat dog hadn't eaten, surgery was hours away, and the money was already gone. No explanation, no help. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. The night settled heavy over Fort Arlington like a leaden curtain, silent, unmoving, suffocating. Sergeant Daniel Rourke stood in his kitchen, hands braced against the edge of the sink, the phone screen still glowing beside him. The message, cold, clinical, burned behind his eyes like a cigarette stubbed out on raw skin. Order canceled. Account flagged for fraud. It didn't compute. Not after 17 years in uniform. Not after a dozen overseas deployments, 6 of them hostile. Not after night patrols where death waited in irrigation ditches and roadside trash bags. And now flagged for fraud by an app designed to get people cheeseburgers and stir-fry. He looked down at Loki, sprawled on the floor with a slow, painful heave of breath. The dog's side rose and fell unevenly, a reminder of what tomorrow held, a splenectomy to remove the fast-growing mass pressing against his vital organs. The vet had been clear. Post-surgery nutrition would be critical. Daniel had placed the meal port order hours in advance. Grain-free, high-protein meals, easy to digest. It had been the best he could do on short notice. And now it was gone. Cancelled. Scrubbed away by an unseen algorithm that never once asked who he was. He tried to call, waited, got disconnected, called again, waited longer. The voice on the other end was lifeless, as if generated by the same code that had killed his dinner. Our fraud detection protocols are proprietary. Once an account is flagged, we cannot reverse the restriction without internal review. Internal review. Like this was a bank audit. Like his dog's life could wait. The fridge held nothing but condiments, expired yogurt, and 2 eggs that had long outlived their sell-by date. The commissary closed hours ago. Fast food delivery services didn't run after 10 p.m. near the base perimeter. Mealport had been his only option, and it had failed him. No, it had judged him. He scrolled through the app one last time, hoping for a way back in, some override, some error to undo, but the interface had already locked him out. It might as well have slapped a red deceiver label across his name, all because his card happened to be a military-issued Chase Gov X, all because his address ended in a unit number starting with Barracks. Daniel sank to the floor beside Loki, the cold tile leaching the heat from his back. The dog stirred, shifting his head with a soft whimper, sensing the tension but too weak to stand. Daniel laid a hand on his scruff and tried not to shake with rage. This wasn't about food, not anymore. This was about being erased by a machine that had never tasted sand or blood or sweat. A machine that didn't care that he'd spent 2 decades giving everything for a flag it now seemed he was invisible beneath. In a brief moment of clarity, Daniel opened his camera app, took a screenshot of the cancellation message, and posted it to X. He typed exactly 13 words, his thumb trembling with exhaustion. Vet can't get food before dog surgery. Account flagged for fraud. Thanks, Mealport. He set the phone down and rested his head against the cabinets, eyes closed, stomach hollow. Somewhere deep inside him, something cracked. Not loudly, not yet. Just a fracture, a warning of what was coming. He didn't know it, but that quiet, furious message had already begun to echo. The first wave came quietly, a few retweets, a couple of sympathetic comments, some shares among military spouse groups and veteran forums. But by morning, the post had mutated into something viral, raw, and unmistakably potent. What began as one man's frustration had become a rallying cry. Within hours, hashtags like hatched mealport fail and vets deserve better were trending across platforms. But more telling than the metrics were the stories. One by one, people stepped forward from behind screens, uniforms, and grief. A Navy widow posted a photo of her infant son in a diaper too small for him, his chubby legs red with pressure marks. The caption cut like shrapnel. They flagged my son's order for diapers, said it was suspicious behavior because my billing address still says naval housing. Another came from a flight medic. We used Mealport between medevac runs. Now I know why it kept rejecting our team card. Guess serving in a war zone makes us look shady. There was no denying the pattern now. EMTs, National Guard reservists, veterans with PTSD whose routines depended on dependable services, they'd all felt it. The slow erosion of trust disguised as technical errors. What had felt like isolated glitches were in fact calculated exclusions, buried under corporate euphemisms. Mealport's official response only added gasoline to the fire. A press release circulated within hours of the initial post gaining traction. We regret any inconvenience caused by our automated fraud prevention system. These incidents are extremely rare and do not reflect our commitment to serving all communities. No apology, no responsibility. Just a sterile mix of lawyer-safe language and algorithmic absolution. But the public wasn't buying it. Then the leak dropped. An anonymous Mealport employee, identified only as MP57, forwarded internal documents to the American Dispatch, a fiercely independent investigative outlet. What they revealed wasn't just negligence, it was policy. One slide from an internal presentation read, Military base IP clusters equals high-risk zone. Flagged orders reduce liability exposure. Another memo, more damning, stated, meal domain accounts require senior management review prior to reactivation. Avoid if uncertain. Do not escalate unless instructed. The language was corporate antiseptic, but its message was poison. Mealport had built its algorithm to treat military personnel and their families as statistical threats, non-compliant anomalies better filtered out than served. The Dispatch's headline detonated across media outlets like a depth charge. Mealport algorithm targets military personnel to cut costs. Cable news picked it up. So did talk radio. Even apolitical daytime segments ran teary interviews with spouses holding babies and veterans with service dogs curled at their feet. The public reaction was swift and ruthless. The Pentagon issued a statement the same evening. Effective immediately, Mealport's access to military installations is suspended, pending formal review. We are investigating systemic bias in commercial platforms servicing federal personnel. In a matter of hours, Mealport's valuation hemorrhaged. Stock fell 23% across 2 trading days. Analysts speculated on class action exposure. Executives scheduled emergency investor calls, but no amount of market spin could hide what had been done, and to whom. Meanwhile, Daniel Rourke sat in a hard plastic chair at the veterinary clinic, his phone vibrating endlessly on the armrest. Messages from strangers poured in, people he didn't know, people he'd never meet, each one echoing the same message. Thank you for speaking up. Across from him, Loki lay in a fleece-lined recovery bed, a shaved patch along his abdomen revealing fresh stitches. The vet had said the surgery went better than expected. Still groggy, the dog flicked his tail once as Daniel raised his phone and snapped a photo. The caption was short, measured, and devastating. One small meal, one huge reckoning. It began, as so many public reckonings do, with a controlled apology wrapped in corporate regret. Mealport's CEO, Stuart Delaney, appeared on the morning broadcast circuit in a tailored navy suit, sitting stiffly across from a host who didn't bother to hide her skepticism. His voice trembled at the edges, just enough to imply emotion, but never enough to derail the script clearly fed to him through an earpiece. This was never our intent, he said. We value our service members deeply. We are re-evaluating all internal protocols and have launched a task force to ensure equity and transparency moving forward. The host didn't blink. The public didn't forgive. Intent was never the question. The damage had been deliberate by design and only accidental in its exposure. The internal memos weren't opinions, they were procedures. There was no mystery left to uncover, only accountability to enforce. By the time Delaney spoke those words, trust had long since bled out. Daniel Rourke didn't watch the interview live. He didn't need to. Clips circulated everywhere, commented, dissected, memed. One particularly brutal edit looped Delaney's phrase, "We value our service members," over images of Loki's shaved incision, soldiers eating MREs in the rain, and the leaked memo line, "Avoid reactivation unless instructed." Daniel had moved beyond rage. What replaced it wasn't forgiveness, it was purpose. Over 20,000 messages poured into his inbox. Former Marines, widows of servicemen, Gold Star parents, military spouses who'd been dismissed by support chatbots while juggling childcare and PTSD flashbacks. Some offered support, others asked how to help, and some just said, "Thank you," for saying what we couldn't. Among them came one message that stood apart, not from a follower, but from a rival. Rally Eats, a veteran-owned startup barely out of its pilot program, had been quietly building steam in the shadows of giants. They didn't boast VC millions or PR contracts. What they had was conviction, and an email from their founder: "We're building something that doesn't forget who it's feeding. We'd be honored if you helped us do it right." Daniel didn't hesitate. He didn't ask for salary, title, or stock. He asked for one thing: integrity. At his first team meeting, held in a converted garage outside Fort Leonard Wood, he stood in front of folding chairs and said something that would later be printed on Rally Eats packaging. "We don't need to be better than the other guys. We just need to remember that a hot meal can mean the world when the world's already cold." The message stuck. Within 6 months, Rally Eats was operating at 5 major military installations. By year's end, they were 10 times larger, quietly, steadily, and without forgetting who they served. They didn't promise perfection. They promised respect, and they delivered. Mealport, for all its frantic pivots, apology campaigns, rebranding stunts, hiring veterans for photo ops, never recovered its soul. It had treated trust as a resource to optimize, and when that trust collapsed, so did the illusion of goodwill. Discounts couldn't buy back dignity. Algorithms couldn't simulate empathy. This reckoning wasn't about a meal app. It was about the line that should never be crossed. The moment a company sees a soldier, a mother, a nurse, not as a human being, but as a liability on a spreadsheet. The public had spoken, and their message, carved in digital stone, was brutally clear. You can't algorithm your way out of injustice.